Cloud. Okay, so it's recording now. All right. So just for the recording, to reiterate, I'm recreating this design, this famous design from the early 20th century. I've imported this into a 1920 by 1080 document, empty document. I put the image, I named the layer image, and it's now locked. And then I created a rectangle black background that's also 1920 by 1080. I'm hiding that and locking it. And I used the rectangle tool and to create this neck and head shape and added anchor points to create the curve and get the shape that I'm looking for. So I'm going to continue from there into the gradient tool. So I want I want the fill to be a gradient. So I'm
Uh,
going to,
just a moment. Where was the um like the button to create like a curve?
okay.
What was the name?
So let's do another shape. In fact, instead of a curve, I'll do just a line segment. I'm going to hide everything. So I'm going to add a new layer called Scratch. Okay, so I have a line. If I draw it out, it's just a line. So the line is made up of two anchor points at either end. This point just shows the center. So in order to create a curve, I'm going to use this anchor point tool. It's underneath the pen tool. So with this little arrow looking tool, I'm going to go to an anchor point and pull out what are referred to as handles. And there we go. So there we have a curve. Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
perfect.
Yep. So, um, Adrian, I need to pause just for a second.
Yes, of course.
I just remembered something. So let me pause recording. Okay, so that's the tool below the pen tool to manipulate shapes. So let's get back to the illustration we're working on. I lock things in order to focus on one particular shape and layer to work on. Um, so in the toolbox, there's this gradient tool. Where is it? Oh, right now it's not a gradient yet. So let's see. Color. I'm going to go to window and look for swatches. And so, okay, so I'm pulling out a few different things here. So swatches are colors that I've already, maybe I used recently. Amongst the swatches are these gradients that are just included with the document. So I'm going to just use this white to black gradient as the fill for this shape. So I need to select it and I need to have the fill on top and click this gradient. So this isn't the right colors. So next, I'm going to use what's called the gradient tool. Okay, so the gradient tool, as long as there's a gradient, as long as there's a shape with a gradient selected, I get this tool, and this permits me to do lots of things. I can resize the gradient, I can change the colors, I can change the direction. So I want it from this sort of skin looking color to white. So I'm going to manipulate this direction so that the gradient works that way. Now, I'm going to double click the black because I don't want black. And you can see that immediately there's a color palette that becomes available. I'm going to use the eyedropper to select this kind of tan color. And now I have a gradient that is close to what the original image is. So I'm happy with that. Um, Now I'm going to leave that shape alone. I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to lock it, hide it, and this new layer I'm going to call face. Okay. So another way to create shapes, rather than using the rectangle key, rectangle or an ellipse or whatever, any shape, I'm just going to use the pen tool. So with the pen tool, I'm going to look at primary points where there's angles. And I'm going to start clicking around this shape to create a face. I like to keep the number of vectors at a minimum. Just, I mean, it depends on the illustration. For this illustration that's very geometric, I'm going to keep them at a minimum. And I know that this curve I can create with a Bezier curve. So I'm not going to click around and try to make a semicircle. I'm going to go up here, click, and I'm just going around and using this face to create an outline. And here I'm a little blind, but well. So when I get to the initial anchor point where I started, you can see that there's a little ring icon below the pen tool. That means that I'm going to create a closed shape. I like working with closed shapes because I feel like I have a lot more control. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And now it's a closed shape. And I'm going to hide I don't want it to be a gradient, but I'm going to hide the fill for now. So I'm going to hide the fill so I can manipulate these anchors to create the actual shape. So once again, there's that anchor point tool to go ahead and start creating my Bezier curves. I'm just going to focus on one side, the side that creates the mouth, and get this out of the way. And I don't want this curve going out like that, so I'm going to grab this anchor point and tuck it back into the vector because I want that to be a clean line. I'm going to do the same up top. Pull it out and then tuck one side in. And I'm going to go over to the ear, create the ear. Uh, are you okay so far?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm going to round this out a little bit here. Um, so it doesn't need to be exact, but just for the sake of example, I'll move these lines, these anchor points a bit to get them closer. Okay, so I'm satisfied with that shape. I'm going to use the eyedropper tool to select, one of these pixels to get this sort of color. And now you'll notice that what it does is it takes the color where I've clicked, but it assumes that, that I just want that color. So I actually lose the outline. For now, I guess I do want the outline. So I'm going to select the path In this little color box, the fill is great. I'm going to select the path and give it a black outline. Okay, good. Um, so now I'm going to lock this, hide it, and I'm going to create these circles. I can see there are three concentric circles. There's white, blue, and black. So I'm going to work from the bottom out. So I'm going to go to the shapes, to the various shapes tools. So the fourth tool in the toolbox, no, the fifth tool. I'm going to choose ellipse. Um, I'm going to zoom in before I start doing this. So I'm going to choose the ellipse and I'm going to create a new layer, call it I. And okay, so there's two ways to create a circle. You can hold down the option key. Yeah, you can hold down the option key and draw from the center out, or you can try to sort of eye where you want it, the top left corner, and draw from there. If you hold the shift key down, it'll keep it has a perfect circle. So I'm holding the shift key down and voila. For now, I'm going to hide the fill. And this time, I'm going to work from the center. So I still have my ellipse tool. That's the one I'm working on. I'm going to go to around the center of this image, of this circle. I'm going to hold down the, let's change the reference point. I'm going to hold down the option tool and draw from the center. I want this to be a circle, so I'm going to hold down the shift. So I'm holding two keyboard keys down, option and shift. Option to draw from the center, shift to keep the circle in perfect. And I'm going to use the arrow keys to move this over a bit. All right. And then the last circle. So this one, I'll do the same way I did the first one. And all right. So I'm going to toggle the path to the fill. So just have a black fill for the center one. And then for the middle one, it's blue. So I'm going to select the fill and just choose a blue color from the swatches. And then the last one is white. So I can just click the default colors, fill and stroke. I haven't saved this a little bit. I'm going to save it. Illustrator doesn't auto save, so it's a good idea to save. And then in this shape,
So, so
yeah,
it's not necessary to create a new layer for each individual circle.
no, not at all. No.
Okay,
No.
okay.
In fact, I'm being really organized with my layers, and I have a background in painting. So I always think about like assembling an image from the bottom up and anything that I want to be its own shape with its own layer, I create a new layer. But this I have, you can see I named it I, and all three ellipses make up the I. So
Oh, okay, thank you.
some people don't even bother creating new layers and just pile everything into a single layer. That for me is like an organizational disaster. So I don't do that.
No, yeah, I agree.
Okay. So lastly, in the same eye, I'm just going to do what's like kind of an ear. So I'm going to go ahead and just draw out that shape. I'm going to switch the black outline with the fill and get rid of the outline altogether. There we go. Okay. Next, let's see what this looks like if I turn everything on. Okay, it's starting to come together. Now I think, let's see, I think I'll do the text next. So I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to lock the eye and I'll call this title. And I'm going to use the line tool to create a line. Oops. So the way the line tool works is you just start drawing. So I'm going to draw a line that goes like that. And now under the type tool, there's a few options. There's the default type tool, type on a path, and vertical type tool. I'm going to use the type on a path, and I'm going to use that line as the path to type on. So as soon as I click on the path, there's some lorem ipsum. There's a bunch of filler text. I'm going to replace that. So under window, I'm going to go to type and character. And this window pops up. So I want my font to be way bigger. So I'm going to go to the max here, 72, and that's not, it's still too small. So I'm going to go with like, I don't know, I'll go with 220. Let's see what that does. Okay, that's pretty cool. That's pretty close. Um, I'm going to bring it down to 206 and just kind of eyeballing. And it's a sans serif font. So I'm going to go with um, maybe Helvetica Bold. And so the letters are all caps, L hyphen INTRA, and there's an S after that, it gets cut off. I'm gonna, doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm gonna move it a little bit down. There we go. Okay, so that's good enough. Um, so I can see in the original one, the letters switch to white once it's on the black. So I'm gonna double click on my line and switch the R and the S to the fill. I'm gonna have it be white. All right, I'm gonna hide my image. Okay, so that's good enough for now. Um, for the text. There's more I could do, like I could select the text and have it be anytime there's type selected, if you want to vectorize it, you can select it and go to type and create outlines. Um, it'll no longer be a font face. It'll just become vector shapes with anchor points that you can manipulate. But I mentioned that last Wednesday. Okay, next, I'm going to create this poll. So I'll use the rectangle tool. Uh, and it's supposed to be like a phone poll. It needs, call it just poll. So this was an image that was celebrating broadcast, like radio, telephone, mass communication, and that this newspaper was at the forefront of the new communication um, modes of communication. So once again, I'm going to use a gradient. There's a gradient that is being used here, and it goes, I think, from lighter brown to darker brown. So I'm going to use the gradient tool to, let's see, I'm going to choose the black and choose kind of a light brown. And then the white, double click on that and choose a darker brown. By the way, you can add more colors to a gradient. So if you hover over it, you can see that there's a little plus sign, and that'll create a new color to add to the gradient. And so you can create pretty complex gradient. Um, and you can also dictate how, where the transition happens from one color to the other color. I'm going to undo that just to leave it. Oops. Okay, that's good. Okay, now I'm going to do the transistors. So I'm going to open that layer with the pole. I'm going to hide the pole. And I just want to look at this shape. So I'm going to use the rectangle tool to draw this shape. And it's kind of circular at the top. So I can select individual anchors. I'm going to select the top ones. And do you see these little knobs? They're there to create rounded corners. So I'm just selecting those two anchors because I want the bottom anchors to remain 90 degrees. And with those two selected, I'm going to round out the shape. Once again, I'll select these two anchors. I'm holding the shift key to select multiple anchors, and I'm just going to move it up a little bit. Okay, next, I want the top, and it's just a sphere. I'm just going to draw a sphere, an ellipse, not a sphere, ellipse, circle. There we go. Okay, so I want these two shapes to combine to become one. Uh, so I'm going to use, last week I mentioned the shape builder. And the way the shape builder works is you have to select the shapes that you want to combine. So I need to select both this and this. And I'm going to use the shape builder to combine them into one. So before I do that, notice in the layers, in that pole layer, there's the path, which was the first shape that I made, and then the ellipse. So I'm pointing these out because when I combine this, they're going to be combined into what's called a compound shape or path. So I'm just going to draw from one to the next, and it's kind of creating this dark overlay, showing me that these three sections are being combined into one shape. And there you see now it's just a single sublayer. Next, I'm going to change the gradient color to mirror this sort of violet to white. So I have my gradient tool. I'm going to go to the first color, and I'll choose this kind of purple. And then the other color, I'll choose white. And then I'm going to move so that there's less purple and more white. The transition is sooner. Okay, I'm happy with that. Close enough. So now with the regular selection tool, I'm going to duplicate these. So I'm going to hold down the shift key. No, sorry. I'm going to hold down the option. And when I click on the option, that selection tool becomes it becomes two arrows. And the lower one, what this is supposed to be saying is that I'm going to create a duplicate. So rather than just moving it, I'm going to use this selection tool. I'm going to hold down the option key and it creates a duplicate. If I hold down the shift key, it'll keep it aligned. Since I'm moving down, it's going to keep it aligned on a vertical axis. I'm going to do it again. Hold down the option key, pull, hold down the shift key, align, and then do the same. Okay, so I want the other three behind the pull. So I'm gonna, once again, hold down the option key and drag out a new shape, put it over here, do it to create a second one. And then a third one. Okay, so these three are supposed to be behind the pole. So I'm going to reorder them in my layers. I'm going to choose the last three, which are the three that I just made, that are the duplicates. And I'm going to I'm going to drag it below the pole. And now I can turn that on. Oh, wait. Why is there, which one's this one? Oh, this one. Okay, I picked the wrong one. So the bottom one should be on top. There we go. Okay. Now the last thing is I can create these lines, these paths. Um, they kind of grow out a little bit, so I could use rectangles, or I can just use the pen tool and create lines. I'm going to use the pen tool, and let's see. They kind of go on top of. Yeah, I'm going to leave them in this layer with the pull layer. And because they're kind of like supposed to be like phone cables. So I'm going to go ahead and mirror this line. Now I'll select it and I'm going to go to the properties. And okay, so it's a line with no shape. It's just a line. But if you look at the colors, it has a fill and no line. So I'm going to change that by clicking the default fill and stroke. I'm going to get rid of the fill. I'm going to go to the stroke. And in the properties window, so if I go from the layers tab to the properties tab, I'm going to make this a thicker line. We'll try 4. Could go bigger. I'll try 8. And the lines can have different types of strokes. So if I go to the stroke and I click on that, there's this profile. So rather than uniform, I'm going to have it be this kind of this other. Yeah, let's see. Um, I'll go with this mark. And okay, so now let's turn everything on. Mm, line's a little odd, but I'll leave it. So I'm just gonna use the pen tool to create the others. If you hold down the command key, it'll switch to the last selection tool that we used because I if I keep clicking, it'll just keep creating the pen tool will just keep creating more vectors, and I don't want that. So I want to deselect this to create the next line. I'm going to hide this. Okay, so I'm just gonna go ahead and create a few more. Hold down the command key, deselect, click away from it, and so all I'm doing is using the pen tool to make these rays, these cables, these lines, and then I'm using the command key to deselect so I can go back to this kind of ear shape. I don't want to click on an anchor because it's going to try to combine or create or keep adding to that line, that path. Now I want all these lines to be the same. So I'm going to lock everything. Do Command A to select everything. And so these lines, these are already selected. And I'm going to go to properties and make sure that they're all 8 point with that other profile. And I'm going to stop there. So I'm going to unlock everything, collapse that layer, and there. So this is my image. Uh, the cables disappear to black. So what I could do at this point is divide those lines. So there is a scissor tool. Scissor tool allows you to cut a shape. Why is it not available? I'm going to type in scissor. Oh, I'm not sure why it's not letting me use it. Here it is. Okay, so I'm going to choose the scissor tool. I can't see my lines, so I'm going to hide everything except this image. Okay, so it's after the pull that it switches. So I'm drawing, I get that it's a pull. I'm gonna lock everything except my lines. And please use scissors well, a segment or an anchor point, but not in that path. Okay, so I'm gonna try to, there we go. So now I clicked on it, the scissor turned that line into two separate lines. And now I can select the one and switch it to a white fill. And I'll do the same with the rest. So I'm just clicking it. It's a scissor, so it does a cut. And I'm just going to create cuts on each one of these. And then I'm going to select them all. I'm holding down the shift key to select multiples. And then I'm going to switch to a white. There we are. Um, there it is. Okay, so it's the image. Any questions?
No, I mean, it was pretty helpful. Now everything is much clearer.
Ah, qué bien, excelente.
Yes.
Um,
And for
yeah,
example, for the assignment we have of
the glyph, the pictogram.
yes, the glyphs, the pictogram. What I was thinking is, um, you know, what I have, the idea I have in my head for like to create a glyph, I usually, use Photoshop and create that image there, and then I can um put that image here in Illustrator and do like what you just
We just did,
did.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I
perfect.
do that. I do that regularly. So, for example, um, I'm out of practice drawing, so I constantly use references. So let me open another. I'm going to open a file just for example. Let's see. See if this one has it. No. Um, anyway, I took a photo, re lightened it and darkened areas or extracted the background in Photoshop, and then brought it into Illustrator. And you can see there's all these layers and recreated. Oh, wait, here we go. So, no, not this one. But so if I so here you can see a face that I used in order to create that. So yeah, so I regularly use tracing to help me.
Oh, okay, perfect. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, that's yeah, I think people regularly, will rework the image that they have in mind in Photoshop, bring it into Illustrator, and then use it as a reference or just to trace and create your graphic. The difference is that in Illustrator, then you can start adding other shapes, other elements to assemble a whole scene. Uh, and then you can, like this head, I just duplicate it with any given layer. You can select it. You can then duplicate it and resize it to have it be what you want it to be. Again, like using layers and keeping everything organized is going to make your illustrations a lot easier to work with.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I agree. I need to have everything organized.
Great. All right, so I'm going to stop recording.